Hello ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Rod Fleming here in the Philippines. I'm really working on the problem of the slight ambient sound that we have in this room. It's very, very difficult to cure because, like all Filipino houses, this one has pure concrete walls and a floor and a ceiling. It's basically a bath. I'm doing my best. Please bear with me. Now, today we want to talk about the miseducation of the American boy. And actually, this is not just the American boy. Well, it's written by a woman called Peggy Orenstein, who I suspect is probably a feminist, and it was published in the Atlantic magazine, so you can make of that what you will. Let's go on. But before we do, please remember, like and share the video. Hit that subscribe button. And please, please, please go onto one of the funding sites, the names of which I will give you, and just send us a little bit to help continue with the work, and maybe to buy some new sound equipment, which we badly need, as you obviously know. Now, let us get on with the show. The miseducation of the American boy. Now, what this person, Peggy Orenstein, says is that she spent 2 years traveling around the United States and talking to adolescent boys at school. This is boys who were up to the age of 20. So I guess, I don't quite know how American classification of ages goes, but they were talking about boys from 16 to 20 basically. And they all appeared to be heavily into what we might call jock culture. They were all into being athletic and said that if you weren't athletic, you weren't considered masculine. There were a lot of things you weren't allowed to do as a boy. And you weren't allowed to show empathy, you weren't allowed to show your feelings. They even thought that apparently that having a girlfriend was a bit gay, because it's all very masculinist. And we should recognize this already. If you've been following my stuff on the New Gay Man, I'm not suggesting these boys are gay, but the way that masculinist bonding between men is very fundamental, it's basic. It happens everywhere. And that's what's happening here. Now, Orenstein actually manages to, I think, hit the nail on the head without realizing it as to why this is happening. And what she says is that women for over 100 years now have shown themselves to be able to run everything without men. And of course she will see it, because she's a woman and probably a feminist, in a positive light. As she says that what she found was that, talking to these boys, that the following qualities were regarded as masculine. And these were dominance, aggression, rugged good looks, with an emphasis on height, sexual prowess, stoicism, athleticism, and wealth, or at least someday, the potential to gain wealth, certainly. And she goes on to say that while following the conventional script may still be social and professional towards boys and men, research shows that those who rigidly adhere to certain masculine norms are not only more likely to harass and bully others, but to themselves be victims of verbal or physical violence. They are more prone to binge drinking, risky sexual behaviour, and getting into car accidents. They are also less happy than other males, with a higher depression rate and fewer friends in whom they can confide. Now, what's happened here, which this woman, I've forgotten his name already, has not actually caught up with, is that she doesn't understand how male bonding works. If you come to a place like the Philippines, or you go to anywhere outside the West, you'll see two groups. You'll see, as I've described, the men group and the not men group, or you might call them the away group and the home group. And these are separate. They're completely separate. And the men group, we've rarely talked about this. We usually talk about the not men or home group, but we'll talk about the men group just now for a minute. Behaviour within the men group is strictly policed by the men within the group, right? And so that's what you're seeing here. Men who don't shape up to the ideals of this particular culture are not considered sufficiently masculine. They're not considered men. Now, in an extreme situation, such as might happen in the Philippines, such a boy might be ejected from the men group. He would then have to join the not men group because there's only two, it's an on-off switch. So he would then be no longer part of the men group and part of the not men group, and effectively he would have to be a baka. There's no other life option for him. He would have to be what is called a second type woman in Thailand. Pause. And then she goes on to say, and this is an interesting observation, the one that really caught my eye. Andrew Smiler, a psychologist who has studied the history of Western masculinity, for him, the ideal late 19th century man was compassionate, a caretaker, but such qualities lost favour as paid labour moved from homes to factories during industrialisation. In fact, the Boy Scouts, whose creed urges members to be loyal, friendly, courteous and kind, was founded in 1910, etc., etc. I think that's extremely unlikely. Baden-Powell founded the Boy Scouts, and it was founded, this organisation was founded in Britain, and it had very particular aims in mind, which I don't think are reflected here, but we'll leave that again to the side. Now, Oriel then goes on to say that Smiler quotes that during World War I, women proved that they could keep the economy humming on their own, and soon afterwards they secured the vote. Instead of embracing gender equality, he says, however, the country's leaders doubled down on the inalienable male right to power, emphasising men's supposedly more logical and less emotional nature as a prerequisite for leadership. And then he says, this is being quoted here, then during the second half of the 20th century, traditional paths to manhood, early marriage, breadwinning began to close, along with the positive traits associated with them. Today, many parents are unsure of how to raise a boy, what sort of masculinity to encourage in their sons. But as I learned, this is Oriel speaking, as I learned from talking to the boys themselves, the culture of adolescence, which fuses hyper-rationality with domination, sexual conquest, and a glorification of male violence, fills the void. Now, this is pretty much exactly what I'd expect a feminist to say. It's amazing how people can take actually true facts, things that did happen, and twist them to fit a completely new narrative. It is absolutely true that during World War I, women did replace men in factories in large measure. But this was not the point at which women entered factories. Women had been working in factories for 150 years by that point. Women, for many women, working women certainly in Britain and also in what became the Union States in America, the United States that is, women, especially those who were single or had indigent husbands, or simply the husband just didn't bring in enough money for the family to survive, women worked in factories. That was the only work that was open to them. In times past, in other cultures, they probably would have worked in agriculture. There are still many women across Europe who work part-time in agriculture as seasonal work, when crops need to be picked. It tends to be women. So this idea that suddenly women were in a different position isn't true. What is true is that feminism came along. And feminism had as its basic raison d'etre, the purpose of feminism was what it called equality. But it didn't actually mean equality. Equality might mean, for most people, I think, the ability to earn equal amounts of money, to be able to do certain things, da-da-dee-da-dee-da. That's never been what feminism was about. Feminism gained those things as incidentals. Its main purpose has always been to replace men, and thus get rid of masculinity. And that, from around about 1970, was a process that went into overdrive. And today, you can say that basically all forms of feminism are essentially anti-male and anti-masculinist. They are absolutely toxic, and basically they hate men. Any woman who says, "Oh, I'm a feminist," and thinks it's only about equality, about getting the same amount of wages, is insane. It's been illegal, certainly in Britain, and as far as I know, the United States, for 40 years, to pay men and women different salary scales for the same work. It's illegal. Family courts are manifestly biased towards women. The idea that there's an equality thing going on here is ridiculous. The ones who are getting stuffed are the men. So what can we actually learn from this interesting observation into the development of the modern man? And that is that when you invade the male space, right, that's what women have done over the last 100 years. You know, if you go into other societies, you'll find that the male spaces still exist. They're still there. There's no women in them. The men run the place, and they run it the way they like it. That doesn't apply so much in work and business anymore, but, you know, these spaces are still available. I can go back, certainly 30 years, you know, into the 1980s, 35 years, and the rows that were going on then, caused by women, because they wanted to be able to join and use male golf clubs, even when there was a fully established and just as luxurious female women-only club, women's club next door, with just as good a clubhouse, da-da-di-da-di-da, all the rest of it. They just wanted to be able to invade male spaces. And this is ongoing. Anybody who supports the idea of male-only golf clubs, which is still legal in Britain, amazingly, will be ridiculed. And by the way, I support them. You can ridicule me as much as you like. And it's not just golf clubs. I think it's absolutely appropriate for men to have their own spaces within which women are not allowed. And that's simple. I don't see why they should be. If they've got equally valid spaces of their own, let them go there. Why should they invade? What is equal about invading male spaces? You can have a space of your own. Men aren't going to go in it. Men don't want to go there. Men don't want to go to a bar where, you know, the place is full of women who are talking about things they are not interested in. They want to go into bars full of men and drink beer, occasionally fart a bit, tell dirty jokes, and generally speaking, have some fun. Right? So what actually is happening here is that the invasion of male spaces by women pushes men. It pushes them out of the male spaces. And what happens is, it's very interesting what then happens, because you get this breakup, this split. And one of the things that happen is that some men become far more masculine. They get really annoyed about this. And it's like, no, we have to counter this. We have to be extra super masculine, because that's how we'll stop the whole thing becoming feminized, because there's some women in it, which is a perfectly reasonable attitude, not always a successful one. Another thing that happens is you'll find that some men will become markedly more feminine. And we see this today, particularly in wokeism, where you get people who call themselves male feminists. It's just not possible for a male to be a feminist. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. That's an illogical proposition. And then again, you get men who have decided now that they just don't want to have anything to do with the entire situation. And to an extent, you always had that. You know, the idea of what's called men going their own way, MGTOW, I accept that the current web-based experience was invented, only 20, 25 years ago. But the idea of men actually doing that, going their own way, has been around for a very long time. If you consider all of the great explorers of the 19th century and before, people like Mungo Park, David Livingstone, dozens of others, what were they doing? Were they taking women with them? Were women going along on these expeditions? Where the hell? No, these were things that men did. Why did they do it? Because they could be men in these groups. And outside the purview of women. They escaped all that. They went, no, we're not having anything to do with it. Okay, dear, they accepted Sir Richard Burton be a very, very good example, and he was a very naughty man. They accepted that there was this social contract that you have to get married and look after the dab. But as soon as they had a home established and they had fulfilled that social contract, they were off. Africa, India, wherever they could find a place to go. There are still men like that. There are still men who are free agents, who are lone blades, who just go out. Some of them are sailing on yachts around the world. Some of them are traveling. Some of them are just simply will not have anything to do with the society that demands that they cede their masculinity to women. They just won't have it. So what we're actually seeing in this development of a form of masculinity that is apparently extra toxic is the effect of women invading male spaces. So girls, you don't have anybody to blame but yourselves for this. If you find that men today are becoming increasingly difficult to deal with, it's because you've become increasingly difficult to deal with. And what did you expect men to do? Did you expect men just to go, aye, that's okay, no problem, we'll go along with that? Are you insane? I mean, you might be, I have to say. I mean, men are not like that. Men are organised, men are freedom-driven, men are risk-takers. Men are, yes, we are the protectors. We are the, men provide, women decide. That's the way it goes. But men are perfectly capable of standing back from that and saying, no, I'm not going to provide anymore. I'm walking. I'm done with it. I'm going to follow my own path, which is what MGTOW is. Now, MGTOW is not something that I specifically either approve of or condemn, because I really don't know enough about it in detail, although I know it. Why are we not allowing men to have their own spaces? Why are we not saying, well, okay, there are areas of professional career, for example, that we just won't try to enter. We won't bother trying to enter the army because we're absolutely crap at being soldiers anyway. I mean, I know, an M15 is an absolutely wonderful leveller, but women simply are not as strong as men. Why are women being firefighters? They're not strong enough to rescue a fully grown man from a fire. So why don't you just leave it to the men to do? Why do you have to invade that space? Why do you have to take away from men the very last few things that they have that are actually masculine? Because what you're going to do, and what you are doing already, is saying to men, the only option you have left is either to become these really aggressive masculine stereotypes, or completely get rid of your masculinity altogether and be a wuss like fucking Owen Jones, some other idiot like that, or simply step back from the whole programme. And more men are doing the last thing, because they know perfectly well if they're super masculine, eventually they end up in jail, or in the USA, you might well get shot or otherwise killed by a policeman. But you have a very good chance of ending up in prison, and that is not a place you want to be. On the other hand, do you really want to be Owen Jones? Do you really want to be one of these appalling wimps who, they have nothing. They have no masculinity, nothing. I know Owen's gay. That's not the point. He also pretends to be a man. I mean, we know he isn't. He's actually a woman. But that's a different argument. And so what's happening is that the invasion of male spaces, which is the direct result of feminism, is what's causing this increase in so-called toxic masculinity. Let me say that again. Feminism is the direct cause of toxic masculinity. Get it in your heads. Put it in your minds. Remember this, because that's what's happening. Every time another male space falls and is colonized by women, there will be more, not less, toxic masculinity. Because men eventually will fight back. They will. And it won't be pretty. It's not pretty already. It's going to get a lot less pretty too. Thank you so much for bearing with me. Remember to hit the like and subscribe button, and the donation URLs are coming up as usual. Take care. We'll see you later. Bye.